So if you have any questions about whatever, that would be a good moment. Otherwise, we can still keep enjoying space and time and that which is beyond it. I guess there is a mic for question. I don't do speeches, so if there are questions.
Thank you.
Oops.
After awareness becomes established and is an abiding state, is there movement within that? Is there an evolution of that awareness? Does it change or deepen in any way?
Yes. But my answer is yes to the question you really asked. I wouldn't have expressed the question in that sense. Of course, awareness doesn't change, and there is no deepening of awareness. But you were referring to more to the human experience, if you will. It's like, the beautiful crescendo in a Bruckner symphony that you think it has reached its climax, but then no, there is some more beauty beyond it, and some more majesty, and some more revelation. It's an unending revelation. Just that at some point, suffering, psychological suffering is behind us. But the celebration and the revelation is endless. In other words, there is some life after after the death of ignorance.
Could you say a little bit about how your experience of awareness has changed?
The experience of awareness doesn't change. In ignorance, all that is real to us are the phenomena, the objects. Then there is a moment we realize that which is real is the presence, and that this presence is both the reality of our human experience, which is mind, and of the world that surrounds us, apparently, and of all other minds. So we share the same common ground both with all human beings and with the objects of the universe, with the universe itself. So that would be the revelation. That would be the liberation from the burden of becoming, of evolving, of being an object, a body, a mind, a persona. And then the leftovers of our past of ignorance that are imprinted as belief systems and also as contractions and feeling systems in the body, having lost their foundation, gradually get released through the intelligence, both of the mind and of the body. And as a result, we enter the realm of celebration, of enjoying, if you will, the fruit of this liberation. So that's the unending celebration I was talking about. Gentleman had a question.
Hi. Some point to awareness or consciousness as the reality or the inner truth, and some say that consciousness is the product of conjunction with the body, incarnation, and that the highest truth is not conscious, just is, or it's simply what's left, or simply what is inescapable. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Yes. I think what we have to be clear about is what we mean by consciousness, because sometimes apparent contradictions or differences can be resolved in this way. What I call consciousness is whatever it is that is truly perceiving these words right now, not that which is allegedly perceiving these words, but that which is truly or really perceiving these words. In other words, consciousness is the reality that perceives. In other words, it's both the reality of the perceiving agent or apparatus, if you will, the reality that perceives, that which truly perceives. Now, it follows from that either there is only one reality, in which case the reality that perceives is also the reality of the universe. Or there are more than two realities. There are the reality that perceives and the reality which is perceived. But then we are facing a problem there, because if the reality that perceives the universe, for instance, is separate and distinct from it, how do they interact? And if they interact, it means somehow that they belong to an ultimate reality that encompasses both, in which case the reality that perceives was not the ultimate reality that perceives. The ultimate reality that perceives is what I call consciousness or awareness. So that being said, you see, of course, it could be said that the reality of everything, is distinct from the realities that, or the so-called realities that apparently perceives, or allegedly perceives. Anyway, we are here in a realm which is a little bit intellectual. I mean, it's interesting because we.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. We've heard from the scientist perspective this last couple days. We've heard a little bit, not too much, about the spiritual, the personal experience of the non-dual world, the greater reality. My question is from beyond the personal perspective and experience to having that be a shared community and expanding it from just the personal experience and reaching out to others. I come from a teaching background, and the experience is only subjective. It's only my experience, and yet I'd love to talk to other people about it, but it's sometimes difficult to share. As I've actually been hearing the last couple of days, different ways of using the dualistic language to share an experience that's truly undefinable. I was wondering, from your perspective, how should we talk to others about this or share? Because to me, I'd like to promote this way of thinking because it has incredible benefits on lots of different levels, and I'd just like to hear your perspective.
It shares itself. It shares itself without really intention, like the bird singing his song on its limb. Sometimes there are people listening or other birds. Sometimes the bird is singing alone in the forest. But that which matters is the origin of our song rather than its direction. And the origin of our song has to be the joy of that which we have discovered. Then our song has music in it. But don't worry about sharing. Worry about being. And once you are it, it shares itself in so many ways. And the talking is just the icing on the cake. You see? Look at children. They don't do as you say. They do as you do. They walk the walk you walk. They don't walk the walk you talk. So the sharing is in the walking, not in the talking. Yes? If you could keep the questions short, because we have a very limited amount of time.
It seems that non-duality is our nature, not only from the scientific perspective, the physics, the chemistry, the biology, but also we're born maybe in a non-dual sense, and we learn this duality. So considering that is plus the amazing adaptability of humans, how quickly we learn, we change, we survive, why is it that we struggle so much to understand being and to just be? Why is it that we struggle so much to really be who we are, who we were ever meant to be, and maybe who we always were?
That's a good question. And that's my answer. I like to keep the answers short, so yes.
I would ask that you say a bit more about the celebration, not because I want to get over or around the suffering. Anyway, I won't say that. But what I associate is Rumi's joyous celebration when he dances in the street to the sound of the goldsmith's hammer, and his poetry. And that's what I perceive as the celebration of life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's not the lyrics. The celebration is not in the lyrics, but in the music. You see. And you mentioned Rumi, and I choose every day Rumi over Advaita talk. Because Rumi has a perfume, he knows what he's talking about. He talks from that place, you see? So, he's my guy.
Sir, could you please elaborate further on the nature of, the reality about the consciousness of the absolute space and the consciousness with the humans, the reality between these two? Please elaborate a little.
The consciousness of absolute space and the human consciousness.
Yeah.
I don't see. The only consciousness I know is my human consciousness. But strangely enough, it turned out that it was bigger than I thought it was. That's all.
The absolute space. How about the reality, the consciousness of absolute space?
Yes, they are one and the same. Atman equals Brahman.
But it differs. In its origin, it is different. It is serene. But with the humans, the consciousness is differing totally.
That which in us perceives is God.
How this acquisition of this occur?
Through God's love.
Is it not by limited knowledge, body-sensed knowledge, the consciousness is differing from the totality?
I'm not getting your question. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Hi. If I have the words right, I believe that Ramana Maharshi said the greatest obstacle to the realization of the self is the belief that we're not already realized. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
Well, of course, if we believe to be a realized person or a non-realized person, in both cases, we believe to be a person. And obviously, that's an obstacle. But remember, there are really no obstacles. What matters is the desire. No matter how big the obstacles, there is always a possibility of a stronger desire that can overcome the obstacles. So it's nicer, in my view, to nurture our desire for the truth rather than to kind of waste our energy worrying about the obstacles. Our desire for the truth in its purest form is joy and enthusiasm. So we should nurture our enthusiasm. It is very important not to break it, not to disappoint it. So we should always allow for enthusiasm to roam freely. You see, because after all, It's about joy, enthusiasm, and freedom. You look at Rumi, we were talking about. He is a perfect expression of all of that, right? That's what touches us in his poetry. This freedom, this unconventional way of speaking of God, sometimes irreverential, you know, and at the same time, God is between the words and behind the words, you see. So we should really take care of our enthusiasm like we would take care of a child, because it is we look at what they mean by consciousness, they mean something else than the consciousness as I defined it, which is that whatever that is, which is truly perceiving these words right this moment. That whatever, because that cannot be measured, cannot be observed through any scientific instrument. So that is beyond the scope of science, because we cannot even conceive of a thought experiment that could tell us anything about the consciousness as I've just defined it. So that's why there is a kind of a turf separation between science and God. Caesar and God. Science is busy with Caesar, which is okay and which is fine, and I respect very much science. I've been flirting with it a long time ago, with physics and mathematics, and I respect it very much. And it's very important not to mix up the genres, you know. In my view, perhaps at some point, physics will have to expand its scope so much that there will be a reunion, you see? But we are not there yet, Daddy. No, we take some time before this event arises at the horizon, you know.
Francis, a short question. You mentioned the word God. What do you mean by God?
Not a gentleman with a long beard sitting on the cloud and extending his finger. The ultimate reality of everything. But for me, because I was raised as an atheist and my religion was science, then the word God is fresh and new, you see? It is virgin.
I would like to ask you a question regarding state of awakeness. When one is awakened, is that, for example, is that the same as being in a state of samadhi? What's your opinion on, what do you have to say about the difference between the state the ultimate samadhi state, and when people say one is awakened to the truth, you're talking about the same thing, or is that just a matter of terminology, or what do you think?
You know, many people, they speak of their experience, and we are never certain that somebody else experiences, although they use the same word, being the word to be awakened, or being the word samadhi, or sahaja samadhi, nirvikalpa samadhi, savikalpa samadhi, that they mean the same thing. So let's give you my definition of it, is to be happy without cause, unshakably, in an unshakable fashion. Unshakable fashion, that's sahaja samadhi. To discover that we are eternal in one single discovery, that's nirvikalpa samadhi, or enlightenment, or awakening.
Question here. So what do you say if, do you, I don't even know that. A person that goes into samadhi every day in their meditations, would you say that individual is in a state of awareness all the time, or is there awakening is happening?
I couldn't care
What
less.
is your,
I couldn't care less. It's for them to say. If they are happy,
that's it. Oh, I see, okay.
that's fine with me. One last question, 2 minutes. No.
You mentioned when Jesus walked the earth, and I wonder what we haven't spoken of time, and I think a lot of history or his story. And
speaking about time, make it short.
Yeah. Time. Okay, good. That's just it. I mean, I believe that we are in manifestations over a period of time, and I'm just curious what.
Okay. You believe we are in manifestation for a period of time. I experience manifestation is in me. I'm not in time. Manifestation, time and space are in me.
Thank you, Francis.